we like to be liked and we like people to agree with us. And so leadership is in those really high exposure situations, being able to sort of step back from people's emotions and wishes and say, actually, I think we've gone to a place where the risk is too high. I focus on investments into healthcare and environmental sustainability. So I was a very passionate angel investor in my 30s, and I got frustrated with some of the challenges and failings of the early stage investment ecosystem, and I saw a huge opportunity to take the interest that I had personally and to help a business that I now co-lead into a professional regulated investment firm. That's a pretty interesting journey to go on from somebody who spent the first 15 years of my career as an athlete and a broadcaster. But you can see that my passion in my 20s and early 30s was about people and performance, about being pioneering, about doing world records and world firsts. When you're then investing in founders who are trying to find better early stage cancer diagnostics, or take microbead plastics out the world's oceans, or affect climate change positively, there's always a real raison d'etre, a real motivation at the core of these businesses other than commercial scale. There's a real global issue that they're trying to be relevant to. So the narrative for me is very, very simple. I live in Scotland, and I did all my global expeditions from that sort of idea of starting here and thinking global. And we do exactly the same thing now with businesses. So I spend my entire life crowding capital in globally into local innovation and science to then scale these businesses globally into the EU, the US. But I think having done something in my own life in my 20s and 30s, that was my founder story. I got to live that journey by taking investment and backing and high performance teams around me and deliver world records and world firsts. And now I get the absolute privilege and opportunity to do the same with a whole ecosystem of founders who are living their founders' journeys. And it's for me to support them as best I can, not just in terms of finance, but in terms of the right networks globally to help these companies succeed at scale. And they're all motivated by commercial success, but they all know it's never going to be a straight line. They always know there's going to be huge challenges along the way. They're all trying to do stuff which, there is not really a precedent for. You're often scaling into markets that don't yet exist. And it takes a certain mindset to have that quiet confidence to build a business for a market that's going to exist in 5 years' time. We're backing a business right now which is about taking microbead plastics out of the world's oceans. And we know that in the next 5 years, there's EU legislation to mandate manufacturers to stop using microbead plastics. Amazing, but it doesn't exist yet. So it's that sort of creating a different future, being very much motivated by positive change, and trying to get the psychology of everyone involved aligned so you can deliver these projects on time and at scale. And you can hear from the way I talk about it, whether you're taking a bicycle around planet Earth, rowing the Atlantic, riding down the side of a volcano, or scaling a clean tech company, it's the same thing in terms of people, performance, yes, a dose of investment, but ultimately it's around trying to be pioneering and trying to take a population with you. We're often working with very knowledge intensive science and businesses that are quite hard to understand. So my role is often to communicate, why is this important? What's the opportunity? Who cares? Why do they care? And how can we really sort of be the catalyst for change around these ideas? And it's so exciting having taken this from an adventure, sport and television career into investment, because I don't come from a corporate finance background. You can build that skill set within the team. But I think the thing which I bring to it is that architect, is that ability to actually imagine a different future and build the right team to deliver that. And that's the stuff that I always enjoy. The biggest challenges in scaling is often about aligning your interests with the market you're trying to scale into. So I see it in the sport and adventure world all the time, where people send me pitches every day of the week and saying, this is important to me and this is what I need and I want you to care. And what people often fail to do is turn the telescope around the other way and think, why would other people care? So it's always about price. People are always saying, I need this money to do that, whether it's scaling a business or cycling around planet Earth. And what people are failing to do is to talk about value. Why would you care? So if you think about, I've cycled around planet Earth twice. I've broken the world record for cycling around the world twice. And I was never backed by cycling brands. I always went to sponsors, backers who had nothing to do with cycling. But I wasn't selling the concept of cycling around the planet. They don't care about cycling. What I said to them is, this is about global ambition. It's about how fast can a human being get around the world. It's about creating leaps in performance. We're not just going to break the record, but we're going to do something that is truly historic. It's going to be about a high performance team, but also a well diversified team. And we're going to tell us a story, which if you take those simple ideas of global ambition, leaps in performance, highly diversified team, is that a powerful metaphor for your business? Do you want to be known as those things? Yes, we'd love to be known by those things. That's a really powerful metaphor for who we are. Great. Well, let's create a partnership which brings that to life for you. So these projects were basically a big metaphor for the partners, the businesses that we worked with. And almost the afterthought to the conversation is, well, what's the cost? So you're not going in and saying, I need £250,000 or I need £1 million. You're saying, this is what I stand for. This is the values of the project. Would it fix a problem for you by being associated with what we are creating here? Yes, that's an amazing. And so you're having a conversation about value, not price. And you build these really sticky relationships where people go, by being associated by that, it makes us look great. It fixes a problem for us. And I literally spend my life trying to help people turn the telescope around and figure out why other people care. And if you can figure out why other people care, you can fix your own sort of challenges around the partnerships you need, the investment you need, the people that you work with, them, because you've stopped and thought, not just how does this fix the problem now, but how do I build relationships that last into the future? It sounds brilliantly simple, but it takes a real pause when you're building any business or any project to stop and go, I need these people or these organizations to succeed. And then genuinely thinking how you present that in a way that just makes it an absolute no-brainer for them. Risk is a difficult word for people because risk is often in the eyes of the beholder. So the way I think about risk is usually using the word exposure as opposed to risk, because exposure is the simple concept of how likely is something to go wrong, and if it does go wrong, how serious are the consequences. So, I've done lots of high altitude mountaineering in my life, and you can be walking along a ridge line, which is very safe, but if you fall, it's 3,000 feet and you're going to die. Or you can be walking along another ridge line, which is very, very technical and difficult. You're very likely to fall, but if you fall, you're going to drop 2 meters and twist your ankle, but no worse. So the exposure question on those two scenarios, a safe ridge, an easy ridge, a dangerous ridge, and therefore if it goes wrong, how far you fall and what happens, is a very useful way of thinking about almost any situation you find yourself in life. So I make financial decisions about investment every single day and team building and what the rest of it. And I'm never really thinking, is it safe or dangerous? Because that's such a clumsy metric and it's often in the eyes of the beholder. So I can talk about climbing the world's highest volcano or rowing the Atlantic or cycling around the world or scaling a business. And I'll have a very different view on the risk because I've done this stuff my entire adult life. Whereas Whereas somebody who's a brain surgeon who's done that for 25 years will have a very different view on the risks they're taking than if I was to try and do what they do. So I think risk is very much in the eyes of the beholder because it's your lived experience to be able to analyze that situation differently. So when people say to me, oh, you must be an absolute adrenaline junkie and a risk taker, I'm not. I'm the opposite. I'm a control freak. And I spend my entire life trying to mitigate risks. Do I put myself into situations where things can go wrong? Absolutely. I've spent my entire life trying to do first and fastest. But the way I think about risk is in a quite an analytical way. So when things have gone horribly wrong, like when I capsized in the Atlantic and spent 14 hours paddling around trying not to drown, I don't really have any trauma from that because I can rationalize what happened and what went wrong. And the behavioral change from those around me was pretty scary to see, you know, the difference between knowing what to do and doing it. But as you can tell, for me, I'm fascinated by doing difficult things. When you do difficult things, there's going to be a different perception on risk based on your lived experience and what you bring to that situation. And then behavioral change under pressure is real. You know, some people just can't cope with it, but it's all about tolerance based on, have you been somewhere similar, which gives you an ability to stay present and be able to think about the situation you're in. And then the really important part is being able to say no, turn back, stop when something hasn't gone wrong because the exposure is too high. So I've turned back expedition teams. I've not done follow-on investments. I've been in lots of situations where nothing has gone wrong, but I've perceived the exposure to have gone tipped too much in the wrong direction. And I've faced situations where my entire expedition team have said to me, but nothing went wrong. And why did you make that decision? Given my life experience and my perception of the situation, I've decided that the exposure is now too great. The chances of something going wrong is now too high. And if it does go wrong, the consequences are very serious. And what's very hard on a sort of human emotional level is when people don't agree with you. You know, we like to be liked and we like people to agree with us. And so leadership is in those really high exposure situations, being able to sort of step back from people's emotions and wishes and say, actually, I think we've gone to a place where the risk is too high. And that's almost harder than dealing with stuff when it goes wrong. Leadership is being able to make the hard decisions when they're unpopular. The best feedback I ever get from events, conferences, keynotes, is when people come back to me, often a good time later, and say, I did this after listening to what you said. Now, I'm not a coach. I'm not a business consultant. I'm not telling people how to do their jobs better or the decisions they might make. But if through speaking about the situations I'm involved in, the teams I've worked with, it unlocks some quiet confidence. It allows people to maybe reprioritize things they were thinking of doing in their lives. It could be very simple things around what matters to them. It could be with their work. It could be with their family. It could be with their community. The best fuel to the fire for me is after I've done events, people come up to me afterwards and go, that allowed me to think about this differently. And that's the action I've taken. And thankfully, I've been doing this for long enough now where, 20, 25 years, where I know that businesses have started, people have broken records. I know a couple that even got married. And look, I can't take personal credit for any one of those things, but they've all very kindly come back to me afterwards and said, after listening to you, I did something differently, which created this change in my life. Ah, fantastic. That's the best thing about storytelling, where it's the butterfly effect. You're not telling people what to do, but you've somehow influenced their thinking around their own priorities, which unlocks some potential that was always there.